So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about the literature from Part 3A of the Latino Reader. So the outline of this presentation is we're going to just talk about all those readings in that section we were assigned to, and the sections I'm going to talk about is the introduction to Part 3A and the Rebel. Paolo is going to talk about Pancho and the Helmet and the Beans. Dallas is going to talk about the Memoirs of Bernardo Vega and the Romance of a Little Village, and Kevin is going to talk about Google Goes to the Party. So for the introduction of Part 3A, this section kind of just talks about a lot of all the readings that we kind of talk about and like how they all tie together, like how the themes and concepts kind of tied together. In this section, they talk about how this is mainly just about the first decades of the 20th century. And they say that these writings in this period of time are considered ethnic consolidation, a steady process of validation, and redefinition of the U.S. culture. And they say this because during this time, this is when they wanted to stand out. This is when they wanted to be different and talk about who they are and really give a good definition of their culture. The Latino reading, a lot of the Latino writing during this time was a lot more inclusive, which means they included every little detail along the way of their journey and gave a lot of background information about who they are. Their main focus was to stand out, so that's why they did this, because a lot of writers don't typically do this, and they just didn't want to be engulfed in the mainstream. And the central thing to most of these writings is that they just wanted people to know the truth about them. They wanted to debunk those stereotypes, and they also went against typical English writing. They wanted to stand out in a way that people really recognized them. So in the first writing, I'm going to talk about The Rebel by Leonor. And the main characters is the rebel herself, Pancho, and Ariselito. And so this book is set in Nuevo Laredo, and there was a flood that was actually happening. But when that flood stopped, they were actually attacked, and the constitutionalists were actually not informed correctly that someone already went to go help with the attack. So with that led the rebel to flee and go help. Throughout the whole chapter, it really just talks about her going around to help people that are wounded and get information about what had just happened, because there wasn't much information about it and everyone was kind of lost on what was going on. And obviously, she couldn't do this job alone, so she did encourage 4 other women to go along with her in this process of trying to help people and heal those wounded. In this part of the Latino Reader, they only give us 1 chapter of the entire book, so there's still a lot of reading that needs to be covered to fully understand what's going on. But from just this 1 chapter, you can tell that the rebel documents this heroic action, the heroic actions of women. So the concept, next I'm going to talk about the concept. It kind of goes against nationalism and hybrid. Against nationalism, I say this because nationalism, it goes against it because of the established state of their cultural imagery, and she's modifying it in that way. So like in the quotes I have, only the rebel and artist will change the beds. So that's norm, that's what they're supposed to do. And then the rebel left the hospital to buy provisions, but instead crossed hurriedly to Laredo. So that's kind of her going against those actions, as in do what you're told to do, and that's it. So she's like, no, I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to go try to figure out some information. And I say hybrid because hybrid, it is an intercultural transformation that produces new cultural forms and subjectives. So I say this applies to her because when she stepped up and went against what she was supposed to be doing and really put herself out there, and when this book came out, a lot of women were really encouraged and motivated to do the same. They wanted to stand out from others and be different and do what they want to do. And as for characteristics, the first one I said, it did challenge conventional norms of mainly gender rather than the class, sex, and race, because she was a woman doing male activities. You could say that her not staying home and cleaning and that's a typical image that women had. She did the opposite. And the second one is that she pushed boundaries linguistically, ideologically, and everything. This book really helped with the new art form that they were building and earned that attention that made women feel more empowered. So that's all for my section, and now it's on to Dallas talking about the next one.
After reading Memoirs of Bernardo Vega, the memoir talks about Vega, who is a Puerto Rican immigrant surviving in New York during the 19th through the early 20th century. He was currently working with other poorly conditioned workers rolling cigarettes. At first, many of the companies did not care about their workers' safety, including his own safety. In order for others to see what he was going through, Vega decides to write about the horrible conditions that him and other Puerto Rican immigrants faced, which is important at that time because it pushes him towards involvement in organizations for immigrants working. Later on, once he secured a job at El Morito, which was a factory where he made friends with other ethnicities, he started to become more intellect over what's happening and started to participate in labor organizations and political parties that are also working with socialist movements. He would every day set a routine to learn about what was currently happening by keeping up with the news and by participating in all the movements around him. This is important because his memoirs revealed a life of hardship that many Puerto Ricans were experiencing and a cultural life that was a shameful reality during his time with other immigrants around him. In Romance of a Little Village by Cleofas Jaramillo, this memoir tells about a girl named Cleofas Jaramillo who writes about her daily life and traditions being the daughter of a prestigious Spanish family growing up in New Mexico. Her childhood is lived in an expensive society that was guided by constant faith and heritage. This guide of faith was a structure of her lifestyle between her friends and her family. However, she was struck with not only modernization and assimilation, but many tragedies, such as an economic depression, many political upsets, and devastations in her family. Throughout the story, she is supposed to marry her cousin, who is a territorial legislator and rancher, but is deemed as an old tradition which was currently changing due to modernization. Her faith and tradition were always structured that way, so she already planned on marrying him. The purpose of this memoir was that the traditions that were from the past started to clash with newer standards. But for Cleofas, she was not prepared for modernization, but went through it, and she wrote about her perspective on religion, customs, family, and politics. As she aged through starting from a young girl to marriage, she talked about her fiestas and later on becoming a mother. This all represents the Hispanic culture in New Mexico, but also the changing life of a woman rapidly moving into a new era with assimilation.
Hello, my name is Kevin, and today I'll be talking about Cuckoo and Cuckoo Goes to a Party, written by Mario Suarez. In the novel Cuckoo Goes to a Party, there's a character named Cuckoo Martinez, and every day is the same for him. He goes to work, and from work he goes straight to his house. According to Cuckoo's brother-in-laws, that is a Mexican way of doing things. One day Cuckoo said to himself that he was not doing the same thing as he would do every day, but instead he would go to his friend's barbershop where he waited for Garza to finish the last haircut he had before heading out to the bar. At the bar, Cuckoo and his friends drank and drank all night until they were all drunk. The following day, Cuckoo went to his friends with, quote-unquote from the novel, a sad look, due to the fact that his wife and his brother-in-law were shaming him because he didn't do what he was supposed to do, which was go straight home after work. According to the novel, the two brother-in-laws would never forget to let Cuckoo know that he was not right for their sister because he wasn't doing the Mexican way, which is, again, as mentioned before, going to work and then going to work after work, going straight to the house. According to the novel, it says that the whole argument and shaming all started because one, Cuco was drunk, and two, he said that he had lost his underwear. The novel ends with not really telling us much, but overall the concept of the novel was it compares a living household of a Mexican household compared to an American household. The concept can be proven in the novel because it states, quote unquote, where he comes from, men did as they pleased, and here, as long as his name is Coco Martinez, he will do the same thing.
Hi, I'm Paola, and I'll be presenting the summary for Pocho by Jose Antonio Villarreal. In the excerpt of Pocho presented in the Latino Reader, Richard arrives home from practice to find a really dirty house, and this enables him to call a family meeting. However, not all the members of the family were cooperating with him, and especially one of his sisters. She was just tired of the problems that her family was having, and she just wasn't having it, and she just didn't really care at the moment to cooperate. Later on that same day, Richard reads a story out loud to his parents. He does this because something tells him that it's going to be the last time that they're together as a family. Many Mexican immigrants were arriving in his town because of World War II. Many of them were part of a group called the Pachucos. The picture at the bottom corner is a picture of the Pachucos, who are sort of like a gang, sort of like gangsters, I guess you could say in a way. Richard becomes very curious and starts to hang out with the Pachucos a lot, and he starts to follow their traditions, even though he doesn't really feel the same way. Then the Pachucos invite Richard to come fight a gang with them. Richard goes, but he's very hesitant about it. In the end, Richard does very well in the fight, which leaves a good impression of him on the Pachucos, and they end up telling him if he ever needs anything, that they got his back. The characteristic Pocho falls under is ethnic consolidation and resistance. The Ham and the Beans by Americo Paredes. In this short story, Americo Paredes displays the suffering of the poor Mexican Americans in America. It shows the struggles of the commoners during the never-ending border conflict. Chonita, a very poor little girl, becomes the joke of the neighborhood children because of her ethnicity and her ability to speak very little English. They make fun of her poem that she creates in English, in which she says, "Give me the ham and the beans." However, she never realizes that they see her as a joke. But the narrator, Chonita's best friend, does, and he's very annoyed by it. And he tells Chonita, but Chonita really doesn't pay attention and just kind of brushes it off. And due to the severe poverty that the narrator and Chonita lives in, she is unable to get proper nourishment that she needs, and she dies at a very young age. The post-colonial concept is identified in the Ham and the Beans, and this quote exemplifies this very well. She went into the grounds and to the mess halls and pressed her nose against the screens and watched the soldiers eat. They sat at long tables, calling to each other through food-stuffed mouths. "Hey, bud, pass the coffee. Give me the ham. Yeah, give me the beans." After the soldiers were through, the cooks came out and scolded Chonita, and then gave her packages with things to eat. And yeah, thank you for watching our presentation.